When the soul fully embraces its deeper calling, life no longer feels accidental. It becomes an undeniable revelation. Carl Jung. Have you ever felt like the life you're living isn't random, like something invisible has been guiding you all along? You might not be able to explain it, but somewhere deep in your chest, you've always sensed a pull, subtle, constant, undeniable. And even when everything seemed confusing on the surface, you still followed it, quietly, faithfully, without a roadmap. You didn't arrive at this moment by accident. Somewhere between the heartbreaks and the silence, the detours and the dead ends, life was sculpting you into something far deeper than your surroundings ever acknowledged. While others rushed ahead chasing certainty, you were being slowed down for a reason. You were being hollowed out, emptied of the noise so that something sacred could grow inside you. It didn't happen overnight. There were years when you questioned everything. You wondered why you felt more than most, why you noticed things others ignored, why people came to you opened up and left lighter while you stayed behind carrying what they couldn't. You didn't ask for that role. You didn't announce yourself as anything special. And yet, it kept happening. Looking back now, it starts to make sense. The choices that once seemed impulsive were aligned. The relationships that ended without warning were exits your soul already knew were necessary. You see it all differently now, not as random, but as preparation. You weren't lost. You were being placed. And maybe this is the moment you begin to understand what that placement was really for. You make people feel safe without trying. There's something about you that people can't explain. They don't always understand it, but they feel it the moment they sit beside you, speak with you, or simply share the same space. Strangers talk to you as if they've known you for years. People tell you things they've never admitted out loud, not even to themselves. They confess, they cry, they unravel right in front of you. And it's not because you're asking the right questions. It's not because you have some degree in psychology or a shelf full of self-help books. It's because of what you carry. It's what you radiate. Your energy feels like permission. Permission to exhale. Permission to be seen without judgment. Permission to stop performing for a world that constantly demands masks and roles and noise. Around you, people finally feel like they can stop pretending. Because you're not pretending. You don't posture. You don't rush to speak. You don't need to fix, prove, or dominate the space. And in a culture obsessed with control and performance, that alone makes you medicine. You didn't try to become this. You didn't wake up one day and decide, I'm going to be the safe space. Life carved that into you. Through pain, through silence, through long nights when no one checked in on you, but you still kept your heart open. You learned how to hold space by first having to hold yourself. When no one else knew what you were going through, you learned to sit with your own storms. And that inner stillness you developed, people feel it, even if they can't name it. They come to you because your presence says, you're safe here. Not through words, but through something deeper. Maybe it's the way you listen without interrupting. Maybe it's the way your eyes don't flinch when someone shows you their mess. Maybe it's the calm in your voice. Or maybe it's that you don't fill silences with noise, you let people arrive at their truth on their own. You hold space not with strategy but with sincerity. And that is rare. There's a gravity to you now, a quiet one. But it pulls people in, not because you're trying to be a savior, but because your soul has become a mirror. People don't always leave you with clear answers, but they do leave lighter. And the truth is, you've been doing this for years without even realizing it. You thought you were just a good listener, or the sensitive one, or the one people vent to. But it was never random. It was a reflection of your vibration. You don't attract pain, you transmute it. You don't hold stories, you make space for people to release the ones that no longer serve them. And maybe that's why you've often felt drained after being around others. Because without realizing it, you were absorbing what they couldn't carry alone. But even in that exhaustion, You never hardened. You didn't shut down. You kept showing up with clarity, with softness, with quiet strength. And over time, you became something sacred, a presence that heals simply by being. In a world starving for real connection, your presence is revolutionary. You remind people without effort what it feels like to be met with warmth instead of expectation, to be held without condition, to be understood without explanation. You're not here to rescue anyone. You're here to remind them they were never broken to begin with. And even if no one has ever said thank you in words, their nervous systems have. Their tears have. Their deep breaths have. The way they soften around you. That's the thank you. That's the proof. You are not invisible. You're not just nice or empathetic. You are something so few people know how to describe: a living sanctuary, a space where people don't just feel safe, they finally feel real. Your presence is healing, not your words. There's something sacred that happens when you enter the room, not because you're loud, not because you command attention. In fact, it's often the opposite. You don't seek the spotlight. You don't try to impress. But somehow, people shift when you're near. They breathe differently. They soften. They pause in ways they never do around others. And they don't know why. But you do. Because you felt it happen again and again. People lean in closer to you without realizing it. Their voices quiet. Their walls come down. Not because you gave them answers or advice or the perfect motivational quote, but because you were there fully, calmly, without judgment. You didn't speak first. You didn't try to fix anything. You didn't reach into their silence with noise. You let the moment unfold. And in doing so, you gave them something few people ever receive: the freedom to just be. You've learned that healing doesn't always look like breakthroughs or revelations. Sometimes it looks like stillness, like sitting in silence with someone who's been carrying too much for too long, like being a steady presence in a storm they don't know how to name. And sometimes the greatest gift you can offer is the quiet assurance you don't have to be anything else right now. This isn't something you learned in school. It wasn't a technique you studied. It's something your soul developed through experience, through endurance, through years of quietly holding emotional weight that no one else could see. Your ability to sit with another person's pain without flinching, without fixing, without fleeing, is not weakness. It is mastery. And it's rare. Most people don't know how to sit in discomfort. They rush to fill the space with platitudes, with solutions, with surface-level positivity. But you don't interrupt the process. You trust it. You know that sometimes the healing doesn't come from talking it out. It comes from being witnessed, being held, being allowed to feel everything without being told to get over it. That is what makes you powerful. Not your explanations, not your knowledge, your capacity to be fully present with what is without trying to escape it. There is a quality to your presence now that words can't touch. It's in your silence. It's in your breath. It's in the calm way you hold the energy of a room. And the reason it feels healing is because you're no longer afraid of pain, your own or anyone else's. You've faced your own shadows. You've sat in the fire without trying to escape. And now that strength lives in you, not loudly, but unmistakably. When people are with you, they don't just feel better. They feel safe. They feel accepted. They feel real. You don't impose yourself on others. You don't direct their path. But you do create a kind of invisible doorway, a space where truth is welcome and masks are not required. And the beauty is, you don't even have to say a word. In fact, often it's the words you don't say that matter most. You know when to stay silent. You know when to simply look someone in the eye and let them see that they are not alone, that what they're feeling isn't too much, that someone else gets it. That's what you've become: not a savior, not a solution, but a sanctuary, a walking, breathing, feeling sanctuary. And the people around you may never know exactly why they feel different in your presence, but they do. Their nervous system knows. Their soul knows. Because you're not reacting from ego. You're not trying to prove anything. You're holding space in the purest sense space that allows truth to rise, pain to surface, and healing to begin, not because you make it happen, but because you don't get in its way. And in this world, that is revolutionary. So no, you're not here to impress. You're not here to persuade. You're here to embody. You're here to show without saying that presence is enough, that being is enough, that you exactly as you are enough, and that more than anything else is what heals. Everything you've lived through was preparation. It didn't feel like preparation when it was happening. Back then it just felt like pain, loss, disconnection, the kind of silence that stretches on for days, weeks, years, where no one calls, no one understands, and even you begin to doubt your own strength. You didn't know what was being built within you. You just knew that life was stripping everything away. The people you once depended on vanished. The paths that once made sense collapsed. And every time you tried to hold on, it slipped further through your fingers. At the time, it felt like failure, like abandonment, like you were cursed with sensitivity in a world that rewards numbness. But looking back now with clearer eyes and a quieter heart, you begin to see something else. It was all intentional, not by your mind, not by some perfect 5-year plan, but by something deeper, something wiser, a force that lives inside you and beyond you, a current that knew exactly what you needed to become, not to survive the world, but to serve in it. That heartbreak that shattered you. It didn't destroy you. It opened you. It cracked the armor you didn't even know you were wearing. It made you feel everything so intensely that numbness was no longer an option. That betrayal, it taught you how to stop outsourcing your worth. That season of isolation, it wasn't punishment, it was placement. A sacred cocoon so that everything false in your life could fall away. So that when you emerged, you were no longer dependent on approval, validation, or performance. Because here's what no one tells you, the pain was not the end. It was the beginning of your refinement. You didn't realize it then, but life was sculpting you into a vessel. And vessels have to be hollowed before they can hold anything real. So life hollowed you through grief, through endings, through disappointments so deep they felt like identity deaths. But in those empty spaces you learned how to breathe, how to sit still, how to listen to the quiet whisper inside the one that always knew. That's why now when others are unraveling, you don't panic. You don't rush in with quick fixes. You recognize their grief, their fear, their confusion because you've been there. You've cried on the bathroom floor. You've stared at the ceiling asking the sky for something, anything that would make it make sense. You've walked through emotional deserts where no one offered water. And somehow, you kept walking, even when you didn't know why. And now, you do. Now you see that every "why is this happening to me" has become a thank you whispered into the wind. You understand that you were never being punished, you were being shaped. The version of you that's here now, calmer, deeper, more anchored, didn't come from ease. It came from surviving yourself. And that survival wasn't just about endurance. It was about awakening. It was about becoming the kind of person who doesn't need to be the loudest in the room because your very presence now holds weight. And what's even more profound is that you no longer want to go back. You wouldn't trade who you are now for who you were, then not even for comfort, because now you live from something real, something earned. And when people ask you how you got here, you don't have a polished answer. You just smile, maybe pause and say, I listened to something inside me, even when I didn't understand it. Because that's the truth. Your path wasn't logical. It wasn't linear, but it was perfect in its timing. Everything that was taken from you made space for what matters. Every detour was divine. And now you understand that your life didn't fall apart. It fell into place. You are no longer the person who begs for clarity. You are clarity. You don't seek safety in others, you've become safety. You don't fear endings, they've become your teachers. Because you've seen now with your own soul that everything you lived through wasn't an interruption, it was the initiation. You are aligned with a higher role. There comes a moment in your journey when you realize this isn't just a phase you're going through. This is a role you've grown into, not because someone handed it to you, not because you earned it in the traditional sense, but because life trusted you with it, quietly, gradually, without ceremony or applause. And now you're beginning to feel the weight of that sacred responsibility, not as a burden, but as a deep inner knowing, I'm here for something more. Not more status, not more attention, not more recognition, but something higher, something that doesn't fit neatly into titles or resumes or LinkedIn bios. This role doesn't come with trophies. It doesn't come with validation. In fact, most of the time, no one even notices you're holding it. But you are. Every day. In every room you enter. In every person you make feel seen. In every silence you honor instead of rushing to fill. In every moment where you stay grounded while others are unraveling, you're holding something far greater than you ever realized. And here's the part no one teaches. Your higher role doesn't begin with doing. It begins with being. It's not about how much you accomplish. It's about how you carry yourself, how you move, how you hold space, how you embody peace when the world is chaotic. You don't impose. You don't instruct. You reflect. You anchor. You transmit. And because of that, people feel different around you, even if they can't explain why. You've likely gone most of your life without being fully understood. Maybe you were labeled as too sensitive, too quiet, too intense, too different. You've spent years wondering why the typical paths never felt right, why you couldn't just play the role, wear the mask, or blend in like others seem to. But now it's becoming clear you were never meant to. You weren't designed to fit in. You were designed to hold space, to be the steady presence in a world of noise, to embody a kind of clarity that can't be taught, only lived. This higher role you're stepping into is not about authority, it's about authenticity. It doesn't demand that you be perfect. It asks that you be real, that you stay close to your center even when no one else is, that you tell the truth with your energy even if your words are few, that you choose integrity over approval, stillness over reaction, depth over performance. And that's exactly what you've been doing even when you didn't realize it, even when it was lonely, even when it cost you relationships, opportunities, or belonging, because something inside you refused to betray itself. And that refusal, that fierce loyalty to your own vibration, has positioned you for something extraordinary. You've become someone others look to, not because you shout the loudest, but because your energy doesn't waver. You've become someone who doesn't need to convince or explain, because you embody what others are still trying to find words for. And that embodiment, that coherence, that is the higher role. It's not about climbing. It's not about chasing. It's about anchoring something real, something rare, something timeless in a world that constantly tries to disconnect us from ourselves. You don't need a stage. You are the stage. You don't need to lead by title. You lead by presence. And as you continue to deepen in this truth, you'll see those who are meant to find you will. Not because you marketed yourself well, but because your frequency called them home. This is what it means to fulfill a sacred role. Not to be more in the eyes of the world, but to be exactly who you are without compromise. And when you live like that, when your breath, your choices, your silence all align, you become something unshakable, something holy, something that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. You are no longer searching for your role. You are living it. And that in itself is the service. Your sensitivity is your compass. There was a time when you saw your sensitivity as something to hide, something inconvenient, something fragile. You were told you were too emotional, too intense, too much. And for years you tried to dull it down. You tried to fit into a world that rewarded detachment, toughness, and speed, a world that glorified being unaffected. But no matter how hard you tried, you could still feel everything. And you carried that like a secret, like something shameful. But now, something has shifted. You've begun to realize that what you thought was a flaw is actually your most accurate instrument. Your sensitivity isn't a weakness, it's your compass. It's your truth teller. It's the way your soul speaks to you before your mind has the words. You don't just hear what people say, you feel what they mean. You sense when energy shifts in a room. You pick up on unsaid tension, suppressed grief, subtle joy, invisible fear. You can feel dishonesty even when it wears a smile. And you can detect safety in someone's silence. That level of perception, that precision, is not ordinary. It's not overthinking. It's intuitive wisdom. And the beauty is, you've stopped questioning it. You no longer need the room to confirm what you already know. You no longer need someone to say, yes, that's what I meant, for you to trust the vibration you felt the moment they walked in. You've stopped asking for permission to feel deeply. You've stopped apologizing for knowing without explanation. Because now you believe yourself. And that changes everything. You're no longer drawn to what only looks good on the outside. You're drawn to what feels true. You know the difference between polished and honest, between loud and real, between love and obligation. And when something is off, even if everything makes sense on the surface, your body lets you know. A tightening in your chest, a drop in your stomach, a quiet dissonance. You no longer ignore those signals. You listen. Because you've learned that your sensitivity is not a curse. It's a sacred technology, a finely tuned inner radar that most people have lost touch with. You didn't lose it. You refined it. Through years of emotional honesty, solitude, and self-trust, you've cultivated a sensitivity so sharp it guides you even through uncertainty. And here's what makes it even more powerful. It doesn't need to control. It doesn't push. It simply reveals. Your sensitivity helps you feel the truth underneath the performance. It allows you to know when someone needs silence more than advice. When it's time to walk away even if no one else understands. When a door is closing, not as punishment, but as protection. Your feelings move before the logic catches up, and now you let them. It's not that you react to every emotion. You don't. You've grown. You've developed discernment. You've learned that just because you feel something doesn't mean you must act on it. But it does mean you must honor it. You don't drown in your feelings anymore. You walk with them. You learn from them. They've become messengers, not enemies. And perhaps, most importantly, you've realized that sensitivity is a bridge. It connects you to others in a way that's beyond language. People feel safe around you not because you say the right things, but because you feel what they're not ready to speak. You don't invade. You don't interrogate. You simply witness. You hold. You recognize something in others because you've journeyed through it yourself. This is why your presence so often softens people. It's not because you fix them. It's because your sensitivity allows them to be real, maybe for the first time in a long time. You hold emotional depth with grace. You create space without needing to fill it. You walk into the room and the vibration changes not because you're forceful, but because you're clear. So now, when someone tries to label you as too sensitive, you don't shrink. You smile. Because you know they're really saying, "You feel more than I know how to handle." And that's not your flaw. That's your gift. That's your guidance system. That's your superpower. And you don't just carry it, you live by it. You don't fit systems because you're here to create new space. You've probably spent most of your life feeling like you're standing slightly outside of everything, like you're in the room, but not of the room. You watched others follow scripts, speak the right lines, wear the expected masks, and something inside you just couldn't do it. It wasn't rebellion for rebellion's sake. You tried. You tried to play along. You tried to blend in. You tried to say the things you were supposed to say in the places you were supposed to say them. But something always cracked inside when you did. Something sacred. Something real. Because you weren't meant to replicate. You weren't designed to comply. You didn't come here to fit into someone else's idea of structure. You came to open space, to make room for something the world hasn't fully seen yet. And in order to do that, you had to walk a lonely road for a while. You had to be the one who didn't quite belong, the one who kept being told, "You're too deep, you're too quiet, you think too much, you care too much." But you kept listening to the quiet part of yourself that whispered, "No, you're not too much, you're just tuned differently." You see it now, don't you? You were never meant to fit into systems built on noise, speed, and surface. Your nervous system doesn't respond to pressure and pretense, it responds to truth. You thrive in spaces where the energy is clean, where the pace is slow enough for souls to catch up, where honesty isn't punished. But for so long, those spaces didn't exist around you. And so for a time, you questioned yourself. You wondered if something was wrong with you. If maybe you were broken because you couldn't force yourself to play a role that felt empty. But now you realize, the discomfort wasn't dysfunction. It was direction. Your inability to fake it wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. It was your soul refusing to cooperate with the inauthentic, the performative, the hollow. And that refusal, quiet, unglamorous, often unseen, has become the very thing that makes you so rare. Because while others adapt by abandoning parts of themselves, you chose a different path. You chose solitude over self-betrayal. You chose silence over small talk. You chose to walk away when the price of belonging meant disconnecting from your truth. And that choice, repeated over and over again, has carved out something sacred inside you. A place untouched by the world's expectations. A space only you can hold. And now, something incredible is happening. You're no longer just noticing that you don't belong, you're becoming the space others are drawn to. You're no longer trying to fit into rooms. You are the room. The way you live, the way you choose, the way you refuse to settle, it's creating an invisible architecture. A new energetic blueprint. One that doesn't dominate or demand, but invites. One that says, you can be real here. You can take off the mask. You don't have to shrink to be accepted. And slowly, people are beginning to feel it. They don't know why, but they breathe easier around you. They speak more slowly. They tell the truth without even meaning to. Because your very existence gives them permission. Not because you're trying to lead, but because you refuse to follow what never felt right. This is what it means to be a builder of new space. Not with bricks or blueprints, but with frequency. You're not just rejecting the old, you're living proof of the new. A living signal that says, there's another way to exist. And you don't have to abandon yourself to get there. So if you still feel like you don't quite fit good, that feeling is not a problem to solve. It's a compass. It means you're on the edge of something original. And that edge is where the world begins to change. You no longer need approval or validation. There was a time when your worth was tied to reactions. You waited for nods, claps, affirmations, even the smallest gesture that would tell you you're doing it right. You're on the right path. And when it came even briefly, you felt seen. But when it didn't, the silence was loud. It made you question everything, your choices, your direction, your very essence. So you began to perform. You performed competence, calm confidence, even when chaos swirled inside you. You showed what you thought people needed to see. You shaped yourself into versions that could be understood, accepted, admired. But no matter how many compliments came in, they never reached the part of you that was actually hurting. They affirmed the surface, not the soul. And deep down, you knew it. Because here's the truth. No one told you validation doesn't heal you. Approval doesn't anchor you. Applause doesn't quiet the longing in your chest. You had to learn that on your own. And you did. Slowly, painfully, quietly, you started to withdraw from the chase. Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. You stopped showing your heart to people who only wanted a performance. You stopped over-explaining your choices to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped measuring your growth in likes, views, and nods from rooms that never truly knew how to hold what you carry. And then, something sacred happened. You began to trust yourself. Not the loud part of you that always wanted to please, but the deeper voice. The one that whispers in stillness. The one that doesn't shout but doesn't lie either. You started to ask different questions, not, do they understand me, but does this feel like truth? Not will they approve, but can I live with this choice even if no one claps? And in that shift, you reclaimed your life. You no longer need people to applaud your boundaries. You simply set them. You no longer seek permission to rest, to say no, to walk away. You just do. Not out of defiance, but out of alignment. You're not here to be agreeable. You're here to be whole. And that wholeness now means more to you than any temporary approval ever could. There's a confidence in you now, not loud, not showy, but unshakable. The kind that comes from living in harmony with your own values. The kind that doesn't need an audience. The kind that can make hard decisions without consulting the crowd. The kind that doesn't need to post every step for it to feel real. Because now you know the deepest resonance isn't public, it's private. It's the feeling you get when you close your eyes at night and know you didn't betray yourself. It's the breath you take after saying no, when everything in you used to say yes, just to keep the peace. It's the stillness inside when you follow your intuition, even if no one else sees the path you're on. You've stopped trying to convince. You've stopped performing for rooms that were never meant to understand you. You've stopped giving your power away to people who only ever saw the version of you that made them comfortable. And in doing so, you've become someone profoundly free. You no longer need to be seen to feel valuable. You don't crave the spotlight. You crave integrity. You crave alignment. You crave peace. And now more than ever, you understand that not everyone will understand you, and that's okay. Because your path is not a group project. Your truth is not up for debate. You no longer fear being misunderstood. You fear betraying your own knowing. That's the sign of someone who's left the old game behind. Someone who's done hustling for validation and started living from the inside out. Someone who understands being true to yourself is the loudest form of clarity you'll ever speak. And now, without trying to prove anything, you've become someone others look to, not because you seek approval, but because you've stopped needing it. And that more than anything is what makes you magnetic now. Not performance, not popularity, but the power of quiet self-trust. Your leadership is subtle but powerful. You never asked to be a leader. In fact, for a long time, you avoided the word entirely. Leadership to you looked like dominance, loud voices, rigid commands, titles on business cards, spotlights, control. And none of that felt like you. You weren't interested in telling people what to do. You didn't care to be the loudest in the room. You didn't want to convince, compete, or conquer. But something has shifted. You've begun to notice that when you walk into a room, something changes. Not because you're trying to change it, but because your energy speaks before you do. People start to breathe easier. They sit up straighter. They slow down. And it's not because of your resume. It's because of your resonance. It's because you carry something that can't be taught, something that can't be bought. You carry coherence. You've become the kind of presence that doesn't demand attention, but commands it quietly, naturally, inevitably. And this is the kind of leadership the world is starved for. Not the kind that rises from ego, but the kind that rises from inner order. From someone who's walked through their own darkness and come out not bitter, but clear. from someone who leads not from above but from within. Your influence isn't in what you say, it's in what you embody. You don't need a microphone to shift a space. You don't need to announce yourself to be felt. Your mere presence speaks of self-trust, self-knowing, and calm direction. You've become a tuning fork, and when others are near you, they start to remember their own frequency. This kind of leadership doesn't show up in performance reviews or popularity metrics. It shows up in moments of chaos when you stay grounded while others spiral. It shows up in hard conversations when you speak with both firmness and compassion. It shows up in silence when you choose stillness over noise, wisdom over reaction, truth over convenience. And the most powerful part, you're not trying to lead. You're just trying to be real. You're living your truth even when it's inconvenient. You're staying true to your center even when it isolates you. You're choosing integrity when performance would be easier. And that is leadership. That is spiritual authority. That is the energy that heals rooms and shifts dynamics without ever needing recognition. You've stopped chasing visibility because you understand now presence is more powerful than performance. You've stopped trying to prove your value because you've learned that true influence doesn't come from validation. It comes from alignment. And the more you align, the more others feel drawn to you, not because you ask them to follow, but because your way of being invites them back to themselves. You lead by example, not by command. You lead by clarity, not by force. And people trust you not because you have all the answers, but because you don't pretend to. They trust you because you've earned your stillness, because you've walked through fire and came back softer, not sharper. They trust you because you hold your truth without needing to defend it. You simply live it. And that makes you magnetic. The old paradigm of leadership is collapsing. The world doesn't need more noise, more control, more hierarchy. It needs coherence. It needs emotional presence. It needs people who can stand in the middle of uncertainty and still be a signal. People like you. So don't underestimate your impact just because it's quiet. Don't doubt your power just because it's subtle. The ones who change the world are not always the ones who are seen. They're the ones who are felt. And you are deeply felt. Not because of what you preach, not because of what you post, but because of what you hold. The energy, the clarity, the stillness, the alignment. That is your leadership. And it's already doing the work, one breath, one moment, one room at a time. Your mere presence is medicine. You've likely noticed something strange, something quiet, subtle, but unmistakable. People soften around you. They open up. They breathe deeper. They begin to say things they haven't spoken to anyone else. Sometimes they cry even when they didn't mean to. Other times, they fall into silence not out of awkwardness, but because they feel safe enough to stop performing. And all the while you're just there. Not trying to heal, not trying to fix, not trying to impress, just being. Fully. Genuinely. Authentically. That's the medicine. Because in a world obsessed with doing, fixing, solving, you've learned the quiet art of being. And your presence, uncluttered by agenda, unclouded by ego, becomes a space where others feel themselves again. They don't know how it works. They can't explain it. But something in them recognizes it. This is what truth feels like. You don't wear a title. You don't need to. Your energy introduces you before words ever could. And what it says is simple but sacred. You are safe here. You can be real. You can fall apart and still be held in love. It's not something you learn from a book. It's something life carved into you, slowly, painfully, beautifully. Through all the moments when you had no one to hold you, you learned how to hold yourself. Through the heartbreaks and disappointments, you didn't just survive, you softened. You chose to stay open when closing off would have been easier. You chose presence over bitterness, clarity over defense, stillness over reaction. And now, you radiate that choice. People feel it before they understand it. It shows in your eyes, in your stillness, in the way you listen without trying to fix. It shows in your silence the kind that isn't empty but full of presence, full of peace, full of permission. And when someone is with you, they don't just feel better. They feel different. They feel more like themselves. They feel home. That's what makes you medicine. Not because you carry all the answers, but because you don't pretend to. Not because you can take someone's pain away, but because you don't turn away from it. You sit with it. You honor it. You trust it to unfold. And that is something the world rarely offers. You see now that this gift, this presence didn't come from ease. It came from fire. It came from silence. It came from nights when you were the one unraveling and no one noticed. And somehow, even then, you chose to stay, to keep listening, to keep becoming. That's why you no longer need to explain yourself. You don't need a stage or applause. You know now that your value isn't in how loud you speak, but in how true you are. And when you show up with that kind of truth, quiet, grounded, unapologetically yourself, you shift something in others without even trying. Because presence doesn't require performance. And healing doesn't always need words. You've become a living sanctuary, not because you studied how to be one, but because life asked you to become one. And you said yes. Through every loss, through every letting go, through every time you chose alignment over approval. That's what shaped you. That's what made you safe. That's what made you medicine. And now people may not always know what to call it. They may not know why they feel lighter when they're with you. Why they walk away from a conversation with you feeling like something in them just clicked into place. But you do. Because you felt it happen again and again. And instead of trying to own it, you simply honor it. This is your role now, not to fix, not to perform, not to be everything to everyone, but to be yourself fully and freely. And in doing that, you offer something the world rarely experiences. A human being who doesn't try to be more, but just is. And that is enough. More than enough. That is healing. In a world that constantly pressures us to prove, to perform, to achieve, there's a quiet kind of power in simply being real. This message reminds us that our deepest impact doesn't always come from what we do, but from what we hold. Your presence, when it's grounded, sincere, and coherent, can be more healing than any advice, louder than any speech, more transformative than any title. The lesson is this: you don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to be understood to be purposeful. You don't need to be seen to be meaningful. When you live in alignment with your own inner truth, when you stop betraying yourself just to belong, something sacred begins to radiate from you. It invites others to do the same. In everyday life, this looks like listening without fixing, saying no without guilt, leaving spaces that drain your energy, trusting your gut even when no one else agrees, choosing peace over performance, and allowing your sensitivity, your intuition, your silence to be your leadership. You're not here to fit into systems that never made room for your soul. You're here to create new spaces through the integrity of your being. And when you do, you become a permission slip for others to return to themselves, not by force, but by example. That's the kind of presence the world needs more of. That's the kind of presence you already are.